Hi everybody, and welcome back to another stream on multidimensionality, consciousness, dreams, whatever we want to talk about, that's what we will talk about. I'm doing it a little different today because I feel like it would be a better time. So today I have the chat open already. I'm just going to do like a Q&A on different just different topics related to multidimensionality, dreams, whatever we want to talk about. And I'll start off because sometimes it takes a minute for the chat to catch up with me. We'll talk first about just different questions I will get, okay? And I wanted to kind of talk about how sometimes we kind of get tricked, how our consciousness, higher aspects kind of trick our ego into going into consciousness. Because I've said before, the ego is very easily manipulated, right? It's very easy to manipulate the ego. And the reason it is because the ego is a very manipulative entity, I don't know, like energy aspect in itself, right? I don't really like the word entity. Gives it a little too much form. It's a very manipulative aspect of us, right? It goes on manipulation. That's what it does. So what the higher aspects of us will do, or soul aspects will do, is it will dangle something the human wants to get you to go down the path of consciousness. Even though, in a sense, it's your time anyway, and you're going to go anyway, and it doesn't really matter in that sense because you're going to go anyway. It's a way to get you on the path when it's your time. So whatever your human wants, it's going to use that to get you opened up to a lot of these concepts. So if you want a partner and you're really into the soulmate, the twin flame, whatever that is, it will dangle something in front of you like that. You know, like for me, I would have dreams, and I was already kind of semi-conscious. I was into different energy work, so I'd already kind of started opening up. I was already very clairaudient, clairvoyant, not to the extent I am now, but you know, back then I was sort of still kind of there, and I would kind of be opening up little by little, right? But when it's time for you to really hit the accelerator on stuff, you'll start to find stuff that really just triggers that one thing you want. And for me, it was always, I was kind of into the whole soulmate, twin flame thing. I had kept having dreams about the same person over and over and over again. And you would I'd see different dreams of this person. I knew the person, but I didn't really know the person. Like, they weren't really physically in my life, but I knew them. So I got what at the time I would do, they're called light activations. A lot of people will kind of have different activations out, and it really doesn't matter what activates you. Something will activate you. And for me, I got an activation about, attracting your twin flame or whatever, but that's really not what it was about. It was more about attracting, I can't remember what it was called. And I still do it from time to time, but I did this thing every night for like 2 years. I was so obsessed with this one thing. It's like the one thing, I thought I wanted. God, I can't remember. I cannot remember what this thing was called. I think it was Divine Union Partnership. That's what it was. Listen to it forever, right? I could recite the whole thing because I listened to it for so long. Now, my soul knew, like, Divine Union Partnership has nothing to do with a twin flame in a sense, or a soulmate. In a sense, everyone's soulmates and everyone's twin flames. So when you're in that mode of just kind of seeking something, you will find something gets dangled that your human's interested in. That's the hook. Just like 3D always kind of dangles that carrot, and you keep trying to get that one thing. The higher dimensions sort of do the same thing, but it's a little trickier when it does it. So it'll dangle that carrot and say, okay, you really want this thing, right? I would listen to it. But Divine Soul Union is more about having a union with yourself. It really has nothing to do with anybody else. So, but the whole premise is, the more you do it, the more you merge with yourself, then you will attract someone else that is also merged with themselves, right? Well, you always our human always wants it to be certain people. right? We kind of get attached to what we see. We get attached to certain people. We get attached to certain realities. So I found myself getting really attached to one certain reality I kept seeing. And I wanted that reality. And I would bust through anything to get to that reality, right? So I would listen to this thing 1,000 times. I would go to places I really didn't want to go to and have to talk about stuff I really didn't want to have to talk about. Because at the time, you don't want to be the weird person, right? You don't want to be the weird girl talking about all the weird stuff. But I had to do that. I couldn't go in and be the human person. I was not really allowed to do that. My higher aspects would be like, you have to go in there and be the weird person. You can't go in there and be like everybody else. That's not what you're here to do. But that's kind of a side story. I'll get back to that one. So when it finally came to starting to see this reality come in with this one person I kept seeing, because sometimes we'll tee up realities when we sleep, and I've talked about that. You kind of see these realities in your dream state, and you see them and you see them and you see them, and you're kind of teeing it up. Like, it can come in. Now, nowhere in my dream state did I see us in a romantic relationship. Not really. I really never kind of saw that, but our human kind of sees what we want to see, and we get hooked on something we want. So we keep going. And eventually, the more you do those activations, the more I kept busting through any fear I had to bust through, whether it was doing videos, doing streams, to just get to that one reality. You kind of understand at some point, you get this epiphany that you really don't require that reality anymore. It really wouldn't be what you thought it was going to be. It doesn't mean it might not come in. And for me, it did come in, and it came in the energy I thought it was going to come in. I thought it would go into a different energy, but it never really did that. But what I saw did come in a couple years later because I had worked toward it. And it was a purpose to the reality. But it's also a carrot that we dangle in front of ourselves. We always will find, the soul knows what the human wants, and it'll always dangle that to get you into it. That's why a lot of the secret books are super popular. The books on manifesting, which is a really human word, manifesting wealth. Because if you're a human that's really into that, that's going to get you hooked on something more energetic. It all has a purpose. It's just not the purpose you think it is. It really has nothing to do with getting the money or getting that one thing you think you want. It's just to get you to expand your consciousness to the point where you understand that's not really what it was about, and that's not really what you want, even though your human wants that. So your soul will start to utilize the things it knows that's going to get to you. If you're having issues with your health, it'll start to, and the traditional medicine, that you've been doing might not be working. It might start steering you toward holistic medicine because you just want to start feeling better. Whatever is your driving force, you will find whatever is your driving force is, it's going to be what hooks you into multidimensionality. Expanding your consciousness, ascending your consciousness. People call it the ascension process. You've seen people call it New Earth. You can call it whatever you want to call it. Everything's kind of been called 1,000 things by now, and it's all kind of the same, but depending who says it, the vibration's different every time somebody else says it. But your human will use things, and it'll continue to use that thing until you get past really needing that thing, and then you start doing it for a different reason. You start doing it because you can see more and understand more of what you're supposed to do. So just be aware that, one, we're never in anything because we have to be. We're never in anything for a human reason. It's never the human reason. There's always something underneath that you have to do. Now you have to, in the beginning, you're not going to be able to see it. Usually you see it when you're kind of out of it, why you had to do it, but it's never going to be the reason you think on why you had to do it. It's always going to be a different reason. There's always going to be something else. So as long as you can comprehend the fact that you're always going to be manipulated in a sense, or I don't know, manipulation might not be the right word, but the human will be tricked. The human will be tricked with something it thinks it wants, and it's going to go toward that, and it's going to go toward that, and it's going to continue to go toward that until it realizes it's really not what it was about in the first place. So you can see what gets you, and everyone has something that's going to get to you. And you'll also see a lot of times people will kind of diverge off into different things because they're not kind of finished with their human, journey yet. So they'll kind of go, from here to there, to get, because they don't know what they want. But I'm doing a Q&A today, so I have my first question. We're talking today about really anything related to ascension, ascending your conscious, multidimensionality. So I was talking about how the human gets manipulated by the soul. I don't really like the word manipulation, but I'm going to use it because it's kind of what happens. Humans also don't like to be left behind. So eventually, the more you expand your consciousness and get into your soul aspects, you start to understand that I lost my train of thought. Hold on. Okay. Once you understand that human can be manipulated, I got it back. It's hard for me to keep the chat on when I start my opening talk because I tend to shift in and out of it. That's why I normally don't do it. Once you realize you can manipulate the human, even when you're in your higher aspects, you start manipulating the human. Like I will be able to manipulate a human really quickly because all humans have one great flaw. And it's also the flaw that kind of keeps you in the third dimensional world, the human world, the human experience, human experiment, if you're really into your galactic aspects. It's what keeps you into that one thing, right? It's the fear of being left out. Every human has it. No human wants to be into it. No human wants to feel like they're on the outside of it. I don't care what the shit it is, okay? It can be something they don't even want to do, but if everybody else is doing it, they don't want to be out of the conversation. That's the one human trait all the humans have. They don't want to be left out. That's what keeps you in the human experiment for so long, and it's why it's hard to get out of it because you keep getting pulled back into it because it is almost like a cult, right? And you don't want to be left out of it. I remember I used to have to go to this place. I say I have to go to this place because I had to go to this place. I hated going to this place. Didn't want to go to this restaurant. I just didn't enjoy it. I had to go to the bar and I would have to sit there. Every week I had to do the same thing. And I just knew I had to do it, right? You have to sit there and the first person and the people are going to come up to you have to talk about, I wouldn't start off with consciousness, but someone would sit down, I'd have to wait for the signal. And the signal was always the same. If I didn't get the signal, I never would go into it. If I got the signal, then I'd have to talk about it because that's why that person was here. We had a contract. We had something we were supposed to do together. We had business together. They were there for information. I was there to provide information. They didn't know that. I knew that, but I wasn't going to tell them that because it didn't matter. They would ask me what I did. As soon as they asked me what I did, that's when you'd open up. That's when I would have to talk about consciousness, multidimensionality, dreams, all the stuff that I was into. That's when I'd have to talk about it. And you'd be surprised the people that kind of would sit next to me. And when I would say that, they would always be someone who was either writing a book about dreaming, had writer's block, usually, or they lost someone, someone who just previously died. They were super upset about that. They wanted to talk about what happens after you die. You would always get people you would never expect to be interested in any of the concepts. But that was my marker. If you asked what I did, I had to go into it. And if you didn't ask, I'd sit there and we would talk about anything else. And believe me, some days I don't want to talk about anything else. I don't want to talk about it because you felt weird. In the beginning, you just feel weird because no one else is talking about it. It's just not a common thing. But I remember there was one person that I knew I was going to see that night just because usually I know ahead. Most of the time I know ahead. I had to see this one person. I had to go do it. So I had an Andara, a little, it's like a sacred glass piece that I gift to people here and there. But I had an Andara for the person. And I took the Andara, put it in my purse. I took two because I felt like, okay, take two. I took it. I was there about 30 minutes. Dude shows up, comes over. He was talking to me about different things. He was kind of getting into this stuff, not 100%. Thought it was kind of a joke. until he started really seeing how he could start shifting things. He kind of thought it was a joke. So I gave him an Andorra, right? And then this other guy comes up that I knew, and he was so crestfallen that this one dude had an Andorra and he didn't get an Andorra. And this other man couldn't have given less than a shit about an Andorra 5 minutes ago, but the fact another person had one and he didn't have one, he wanted it so bad. His feelings were so hurt that he didn't get one. And that goes back into feeling left out. Whether it's something you want or not, it didn't matter. He just wanted that Andorra because someone else had one. So I bought two. That was why I bought two. Gave him the Andorra, and he was just, pepper it up, because then he had one too. And they could both play with them. And they would hold them in their hand. They were in the middle of the bar, and they would say, okay, we're going to clear karmic timelines, which is something I talked to them about doing. They're holding these Andorras, and they're talking about clearing karmic timelines in the middle of the bar. It was completely normal. Completely normal. Everywhere I go, this stuff just becomes completely normal. And it was just so funny to watch just them doing it together. And of course, when you start saying, I want to clear karmic timelines, it's like, they think it's a joke. And I told him, I was like, you don't invoke this kind of stuff unless you're ready to watch a lot of your human stuff kind of collapse. Because it will. Because nothing the human builds is not a karmic timeline. It's all karmic timelines. So a lot of it will start collapsing. You're just speeding up the process of stuff that was going to collapse anyway. So, a few weeks later, for one, it was like 4 or 5 weeks later, he lost his job pretty suddenly. The other one lost his job like 2 months later. And they're both like, one in particular is in complete disarray. He's like, I thought this was supposed to do something else. I'm like, you have the power to shift anything. A lot of people don't want to take the power and say, I can shift anything out. But when it starts to shift out, the human doesn't like the shifts. The human wants it to be a different way. That's why when you get into consciousness, you get into it normally for what the human wants. But it's never going to be about what the human wants. What the human wants is distorted. What the human wants is not pure. It will be. So when you start watching what motivates people, what doesn't motivate people, you can start to kind of see what's going to get them. And you'll start to see it. And you'll start to notice what gets people involved. You can tell some of the most popular, what you would call spiritual books, which I really don't like that word, spirituality. It's kind of overdone. You kind of become spirit informed. You kind of drop spirituality because there's a lot of distortions in that, a lot of distortions in those timelines in general. And you start to watch what gets people. And some of the most popular spiritual books are the ones that involve attracting money, because everyone thinks, oh, that's what I want. If I had money, it's all different, right? That's if I could just figure that one out. Well, it takes a while to figure that one out from someone who's been trying to figure that one out for a while, because the human doesn't really value money. When the human gets money, the money's for the human. It doesn't think about other people. Or if it does, it doesn't think about other people. It thinks about certain people, not understanding that giving money to certain people might take them off their path. Now, I have not seen the movie Eternals. I'll probably see it at some point. I haven't seen it. I do know there is some talk in there about, if we interfere, then if we interfere, the humans will go through their growth process. It's kind of a similar thing. Human wants to interfere because it wants to make everything. It wants to save everybody and make it better. It values one person over the other. It has cords or attachment to one person, blood family. If you do have that soul, if you're into the soulmate twin flame energies, that person's kind of gets a pass. That person is above everybody else in a sense. So you'll do things for these people that you wouldn't do for everybody else. But that's sometimes not the best way for those people to grow. That's why a lot of people say, I hear this so much. People say, if I won the lottery, I'd give it to all my family or my friends. That's why you're never going to win the lottery. Because you're not going to use the money. Giving the money to these people might not be the best way for their growth. It just might not be. Normally it's not. Money doesn't really help anybody grow in a sense. It makes things easier. Doesn't ever make anybody happy. And if you have the distortion running that it will make you happy, it's very quickly going to be shown it never makes anybody happy. In the history of the world, it's never made anybody happy. It just makes it easier. It's something you don't have to be concerned about. when you have your mind on certain things, and you see it in all different avenues, people who have a lot of money, people who don't have any money, and have chosen, and I say chosen because we do kind of pick everything before we come in, right? We kind of know where we want to be, what we're going to do. We just don't remember making the choices, don't remember making the agreements. People who decide to live homeless are here to kind of mirror back to us what we don't want to look at. We don't want to look at that. We don't want to see that. I hear so many people say they will avoid people that are homeless on the street because they don't want to have to be near them. Or people will go out of their way, drive 3 miles out of their way so they don't have to go by this certain intersection. That's human programming. That's human programming. You don't want to see it. When there's really not a lot of, there's no separation between the two. That person has decided on a different journey, but it also shows what you don't want to look at. It's also forcing you to look at something you don't want to look at. The human in itself is not generous. People will say, oh, well, that's generous if someone donates, someone has $1 billion and they donate, 80 million. Well, it's generous. Well, when you have $1 billion, 80 million is really not that much. When there could be so much more we could do. But the human won't do that. That's why you're going to have to see at some point a shift in the human values. And if the humans won't shift, then you're going to see a lot of people start to exit. So many people have seen a mass exodus of the planet. It hasn't been something that is kind of new. Most people haven't seen it for years. It's going to be a mass exodus of people going. Now, is that going to be over 5 years, 10 years, 300 years? I mean, time's all linear. Time's all linear. Time doesn't exist anyway. How long it's going to take is going to depend. Or if people are just going to have to completely shift out of the human understanding altogether, because we are the most dangerous animals on the planet, 100%. We have no loyalty to anyone but ourselves. The human aspect is not to be trusted. I don't trust mine. I'll never trust mine. When I'm in my human aspect, I know I cannot trust anything it says. Because it's distorted. It wants what it wants in the moment. Because it's trying to fill, it doesn't realize the one difference between consciousness and unconsciousness. And it's not a judgment on where anybody is. It's just to cite the differences in the two. When you're in your human realities, you're trying to fill the void, which is being separated from consciousness, source consciousness, being separated from everything. Because the human DNA is to separate. It separates everything apart. So unconsciously, you're always trying to fill that void, right? You're always trying to fill that void. And everything you do is to fill that void. You just don't realize that's what you're trying to do. You make up all these stories around why I need to have that car, why I need to have that person, why I need to have the money, why I need to have this, why I'm going to now get, and a lot of people will sometimes get into spirituality to try to find what it is they can't, kind of the void they can't fill, the hole they can't fill, but they're always looking outside for it. Now, when you get into a lot of spirituality concepts, it does help you fill a lot of that void, but you have to be able to hold it. Spirituality is not when you meditate for 30 minutes a day and then you go on the rest of your life and be a human the rest of the time. You have to hold the higher aspect all the time. You have to embody the higher aspect. That's where it gets tricky, because you start embodying the higher aspects. So none of your human stuff fits anymore. It doesn't feel right. It doesn't look right. So then you kind of flip. And now consciously, you understand why the human's motivated to do everything. But there is a point, we all go through that point where we're like, boy, if only I could be unconscious again. Wouldn't that be great? Because at least I didn't realize how all the stuff I was creating and all the ups and downs and twists and turns I was going through. Like, I didn't understand it at the time. I didn't know. Once you know, it's different. You can't go back. You can just see everything people create. And I can see what people create. And I know what's coming on the other side of that at some point for everybody. But we were all in the same place. We all did the same things. We all created the same stuff. But there is some type of, and that's why I would always say it was described as kind of third dimensional human realities. They're kind of like cult mentalities, and they really are cult mentalities. it kind of tries to suck you back in. With, oh, if you only had this, it would be better, or you get ostracized from the group. And when you're going into your soul aspects and your ascension journeys, sending your consciousness, you do get ostracized from the group. But you're kind of supposed to be ostracized from the group because you can't, it's not a group activity. Because you have to find your own self. You have to embody in your own aspects. You can't do it with other people around. It's more challenging. I guess I can't say you can't do it with other people around. There is a time when you have to be a lot of alone time. So normally people will plan certain parts of their journey. And I'll say plan because you kind of plan it out to be doing it during certain years of your life. If you have kids, you might say, okay, I'm gonna have to wait till after the kids are gone. But it's not a conscious thing in those moments when you planned it out. You will just find you're going through those journeys when the kids are gone. And that's when stuff kicks in for you because now you don't have that. I find people go faster when they don't have those other things. You don't have the family commitments. You don't have all those things. You can kind of jump faster than other people, even though you're really not jumping faster. They're in a different, they're kind of in a different mode with it. Their journey's a little different because they have put in other things. Because they had other contracts to fill, like people who are supposed to have kids, because the sex thing comes up quite a bit with Ascension, like, oh, you don't have sex, you do have sex. That's like a zillion different reasons for both, right? There's a purpose for all the realities we go through. And when you hear a lot of people, when they talk about Ascension, they'll say, oh, it's attaining your DNA, you don't have sex anymore. But when people hear that, and you let people hear that and go, oh, yeah, but I want to have kids. It's like, well, if you weren't going to have kids and you know you're supposed to have kids, then you're not in that part of the journey yet. It doesn't mean you might not at some point go to that part of the journey, but you're not in that part of the journey yet because that's how you have children. That's how that normally works. So it's not like a one size fits all. None of it's a one size fits all. It's always going to be different. Everyone has mapped out their journey a different way. Some people are going faster because they're supposed to go faster. They're supposed to be like the next group of people. It goes in waves. It's not just, everyone does it at one time. The planet, well, I don't say the planet could do it. The human population could not handle everyone ascending at the same time. It's too much shit that comes up during your ascension process to handle everyone doing it at the same time. Too much of your stuff comes up, too much stuff gets rearranged. That's why everyone has to go in waves. And the more people that have come through, it brings the next wave of people through. And then the next wave of people through. And we continuously go through the next wave of people. It's like a 10-year period, 2010, 2020. You have people come through and there are like three period markers in each wave. And then it just kind of collapses into wave one. And now you're starting to see the wave tours. 2020 kicked off the wave tours where you had the first wave, second wave, third wave. Now, a lot of the first wavers don't know where they are yet. When I was in my wave, started my wave in like 2013, whereas a lot of people in the very first stage of that first wave, that was back in, they were kind of ascending in 2012. I was more like the second part of that first wave. But you can start to see where people are and how far people are going, how far people have gotten. And it's kind of neat to watch the waves. But there are more people conscious than there used to be. But you can't take, but all the collectives aren't. There's still a population of the planet is still unconscious in a sense. There's more enlightenment in a sense, but they're still mainly, they can't hold the consciousness level. They kind of pick and choose. The human wants to kind of pick and choose what it wants to do. It doesn't want to be really out there. It doesn't want to be the weird person in a sense. And a lot of it's really not that weird anymore. Like so many times I've gone someplace and sat down and we start talking about something. I always wait for my marker. I get my marker. Someone asks me, what do you do? That's my key code. I'm like, okay, you're one of mine. You're here for me. We'll just talk about galactic races. We'll just come up and this person will be like, oh my God, you're talking my language. I'm totally into this. And it's, it's not like it's, some people say, okay, younger people are more open or older people are more open. It's everybody. But it's never who you would think it would be. It can be some person, that's looks like one of Hill's angels, and all of a sudden he wants to talk about a dream he's had for 30 times over the past 10 years. You know, consciousness doesn't have a look. You know, you can't peg it, and that's the best thing about it in a sense, because everyone has the access to do it. Well, everyone has the capability to do it, not everyone has the access yet. So when you start getting into who has access, some people have more access because they've gained the access, but everyone has the capability to get the access, and at some point they will, whether they do it on this planet or not. You know, that's kind of up to everyone's you know, question on where they want to be with it. But okay, so if I have any other questions, I'll talk to those. Any other questions about anything? As long as it's semi-consciousness related. Sometimes the chat can get a little, I started actually closing it early or not opening it right away because sometimes it would kind of skew off into topics, and I wanted to kind of keep the streams on certain topics. So I like to set the energy of the room and then go to the chat. Sometimes I feel like I lose a few people doing that, which is fine. It's not that big of a deal. Let's see. I can also go with some of my very famous questions I get if I don't have a lot of people that want to ask questions. But the other question I'll get all the time, my favorite one, you make money doing this? I've heard that so many times. You make money doing that? You make money talking about consciousness? You make money doing that? Blows the mind of people that you actually make money doing it. Now, making money when you're in your higher dimensions and living in those dimensions and making money in your human realities, it's a different concept in a sense. Money will come in when you're in alignment with what you're supposed to do. Now, it might not be as much money as you were making as a human in the beginning, because you can't really be trusted with money. I think we talked about that earlier. Humans can't be trusted with money. So until you prove to your higher aspects, in a sense, become your higher aspects, that you can be trusted with money, it won't give you money. It also wants to show you that money doesn't really matter. Money isn't dictating your happiness. Money isn't dictating any of those things. It's just not. Money doesn't really matter. And you will find, and I have found, there have been times I've had no money at all, times I've had tons of money. It didn't matter. Your connection doesn't change in a sense. You can get frustrated with the money thing because you're like, oh, come on, I can be trusted. Give me more. I can be trusted. But then you have to really look like, oh, can I be? Then you find yourself getting tested. You'll get a group of money, you'll get money that comes in, you'll be like, oh, and then you'll get all the notifications, whatever used to get to you. Like I used to be a big shopper. You know, if I saw any kind of email like, oh, 20% off, even if it's something I don't need, it's 20% off. Are you kidding? I got to go do that. You kind of find yourself being tested with a lot of that stuff. Can you say no? Do you need that? And that's kind of what you'll say. It's like, I don't really need that. If I needed it, it's one thing. Well, I don't really need to get all this stuff. None of that stuff really matters. The stuff you think you need is never really that important. You find you start prioritizing your soul body, your light body. So, you know, organic stuff, clean water. I had to put filters on everything. I had to change all my cosmetics to, you know, clean cosmetics. Everything had to be clean. I couldn't deal with any of the chemicals anymore. You start prioritizing those types of things. And the other stuff kind of takes a back seat. It's just not, it's not as critical to do the other things. It doesn't matter as much. And you start to realize what matters and what doesn't matter. And money really does flip. Because you realize money is for the collectives. It's for everyone else in a sense. It's for you. Because you do use it to support your body. You need a place to live. I mean, everyone will sit there and look at people in any kind of soul work. Let's call it soul work, because I don't really like a lot of the other terms. But any type of work you'll do, and people will be like, oh, I can't believe they make money doing that. But when I look back at different human jobs, I'm like, oh, I can't believe you make money doing that. Really? People pay you to argue about something, or people pay you to advertise something, or whatever it is. They just feel like when you get to the different realms, you're in higher dimensional realities and you start anchoring them into your reality, all those things seem silly. But what I do seems silly if you're in if you're in your human experience, it seems silly. But it starts to flip when you look at that stuff and go, well, that stuff seems silly. You realize none of that matters, right? But you can't say that because it does matter to them. So it's just always going to be a question you get. Or what do you do? That's another question. And you try to explain that because it differs from who you're talking to. Different people are going to require a different answer for that. And a lot of times when you're embracing your multiple aspects of yourself, you do a lot of stuff. You might write, you could stream, you could do videos, you could do a blog, you could, do a lot of stuff for the earth. A lot of people, they'll call them gatekeepers, gatekeepers, they go out and do a lot of stuff with Gaia, with earth. It's 1,000 things you do. You don't just do one thing. Human realities, you just do one thing. In the higher realities, higher soul realities, and in the higher dimensions, which is the third dimension, is what people call a human dimension, but it's just a level of consciousness. Third dimension is a third dimensional level of consciousness, the human ego consciousness. You have fourth dimension where you're kind of in the middle, 1 foot in the higher dimension, 1 foot in the people stay in the fourth dimension a long time. I stayed in the fourth dimension a long time, always thinking I was in the higher dimensions, but I wasn't. I was still in the fourth because still hanging on to stuff in the third dimensions. Then you have 5 dimension, the fifth dimension, where you kind of leave all that behind, but you still haven't embodied everything in yet. There's still so much more programming to clear. And then you get 6th dimension, 7th dimension, 8th dimension, 9th dimension, but you have to bring your body with you. That's what takes the time. You can achieve the level of consciousness, but you have to hold that consciousness long enough. Like I could achieve an 8th dimensional level of consciousness, right? I could hit that. Now I got to be able to hold that. And it could be hold that for years to get my DNA to recode to that level of consciousness. But until my body, and to get my body clean enough to hold that level of consciousness and get rid of anything that's not that level of consciousness, emotions that don't match with that, whatever it is, I have to get all that stuff out of my body. So I have to hold it with the body. That's where a lot of people think, oh, I just hit that level, I'm done. No, you're not done after you hit that level of consciousness. It takes time. It could be a 7 to 10 year cycle for full body ascension. And that's if you're giving it every moment you got. That's not being running around in human realities for a while or taking a detour. Even though you can't really take a detour, you're still supposed to go, you're going through that for a reason. You can go through the distorted realities. You're still clearing programming and clearing distortions going through it. It's just not that comfortable. It's not that fast. Or you can do it more energetically. But you can't really do it energetically until you get to a point where you can do it energetically. It's not that easy. It's easy to say, oh, I'll just do it energetically. But until you get to a consciousness where you can do it energetically, you can't do it energetically yet. You have to go through it. Because you don't want it, you can't see it yet because you got so many emotions around it, you just can't see it yet. Sometimes that happens where you just don't see it. But that's okay. You're not supposed to see it yet. When you're supposed to see it, you'll see it. Now, if you see it and you still keep going through the same shit with the same people, the same distortions, then you might find it a little harsher reality at the end of it because you're not willing to shift it yourself. So your universe will shift it for you. That's why we have eclipses every year. Astrologically, all the planets, everything, it's all like inside of us. We're all of it. We're all of it. It's a big universal clear out every year. Universe decides what stays, what goes if you haven't done it yourself. That's why we have eclipses every year. It keeps everyone on some kind of track of what they're supposed to do. Oh, I got a new question. Is this really real? I don't know if I understand the question. In general, am I really real? Or is your reality really real? Clarify that one for me. I am real, if that's a question. Sort of. It is real, yeah. I am real. I am a real person. Oh, I lost my train of thought. Sorry. What's a fake stream? I just had a question. Someone says there's a fake stream. I don't know what a fake stream is. What is a fake stream? A stream's a stream. I don't know what would constitute a fake stream. Oh yeah, because the stream is about the Matrix. Is it fake? It is real. It is a real stream. I don't pre-record them. Some people think I do pre-record them, but in the first 20 minutes, I normally don't cut the chat on. I don't turn it on because it can distract me a bit. So I like to at least get some points out because I do load them on SoundCloud. Oh, they restream them. You see, yeah. Well, I think you get more people to see stuff if you restream stuff. It's one thing I kind of like and don't like about Twitch. You can't really keep stuff for long. Even if you have, and how many followers you have, it depends on how long you can keep stuff on here. So it kind of probably lends to more people like restreaming, but it's kind of going to be everybody's thing, but I guess it doesn't matter. People do it or it feels right. Sometimes restreaming might have a purpose. Sometimes it doesn't. I do more like to do it live. It's quicker. Oh, other people's content. Yeah, sometimes I do upload some of my stuff to YouTube. Sometimes I don't. I do shorter videos for YouTube and Instagram that are quicker because you can kind of multi-purpose a lot of content. A lot of my stuff, I will take these files and I'll put them on SoundCloud. That's why I normally like to get at least 20 to 25 minutes in of just something I wanted to get across before I open the chat and open it up to just chatting with people, because I get some content out. Because sometimes I'm not super great about reading the question, answering the question, looking at the chat. So I like to get some point across because I upload them to SoundCloud. Oh, Eclipses. All right, thank you. I was forgetting about that. We have all the planets. We are like the entire universe. Whether you've embraced the concept or not, you're at the consciousness to see that yet. We are the entire universe, right? So the eclipses are kind of inside of us. If you haven't expanded your consciousness out enough, it's still going to feel like it's outside of you, right? The eclipses clear shit out. That's what they do. You will find people lose jobs, lose husbands, lose wives, lose everything during an eclipse. That's why we have them every year. It's a universal clean up your yard. It's your universe telling you the shit's got to go. Most of the time, we know shit's got to go. We just don't want to get rid of it. In our human aspects, we're in our human ego programming, our human realities. We don't want to get rid of stuff. We wait for it to get taken away, wait for it to crash down on top of us because we don't want to actually have to man up or woman up and do it. We don't want to have to put our big grown-up pants on, in a sense, and get rid of stuff. Humans don't want to have, I just say humans, just speaking of the human and the ego aspects of ourselves. We all have the human aspects. It's where do you live from? That's when we talk about different levels of consciousness. What consciousness do you live from? If you live from your human consciousness, you don't want anything to have to go. Humans don't want to have a conversation about it. They will get around it. They will lie about it. They will dip and dodge. They don't want to deal with it. I've had so many people say, well, I'll just ignore it and they'll get the point. I'll just ignore it and it'll go away. You might even get that situation to go away, but the energetics will come back and bite you in the ass. Because you're telling your universe, I can't deal with it yet, so I need to go through it again. Until I can end it in its highest pace, no matter what that takes, whether that takes me sitting down with a person to end a reality, whether it takes putting a lot of money into ending a reality. I paid a lot of money to end realities, thousands of dollars just to end a reality in the highest place I could be. The person you end the reality with might not still enjoy that you're ending it, but you're still trying to do it from your highest place possible. You're not just doing it from, trying to avoid it and hoping the other person gets the point. That will bite you. It'll always come back and bite you. And how far you are on your journey, it'll come back quicker. I've seen a lot of people, you see a lot of this now because, you have everything in the limelight of what everyone does now thanks to social media. Everything's kind of out there. If you see one person do something and you see someone jump on that person for, oh, you shouldn't do that. That's terrible. I can't believe you did that. And then 3 weeks later, they did something. Everyone's jumping on them. Because they're in a part of their process where, okay, well, that shit came around really fast and hit you back. It will slap you upside the face very quickly, depending on how far you are in your process, because they're going to be shown. You're going to sit there and judge that person. Okay, well, now you're going to be judged by someone. Someone's going to come in and do it to you. But we really can't be judged if we don't hold judgment. We're the ones that hold back everything we can do because we feel judged. We feel we're judging what we do. We're the biggest judges of ourselves. People just mimic that back to you. People say things back to you that you actually feel, or they wouldn't say them. That's why they say them. People can say some stuff and you'll be like, I don't really feel that way. But if it gets to you, it upsets you in some way, you know damn well you feel that way, or it wouldn't bother you. If it doesn't bother you, it's different. When it starts bothering you, okay, you know it then belongs to you. And most of the stuff does belong to us. We're the ones that humans don't want to deal with anything. We don't want to move anything out. We don't want to shift anything. We don't want to believe, A, we have the power to do it, so we want someone else to do it. I want to give my power away to 15 other people, and then if the shit goes sideways, I have someone else to blame. That's how the human plays. That's why I started this whole thing out saying it's easy to manipulate a human. Very easy to manipulate a human. It's like when you see children manipulating their parents to get what they want, to get toys, to get candy, whatever it is. They figure out very quickly what gets to them. Because kids are still really connected up. Even though what they're doing is a little distorted, they're so connected up to being able to read the parents. They know what they can get away with, what they can't get away with. They know what's going to get to them. Humans don't like, I said this earlier, they don't like to be left out. You leave a human out of something, they will lose their shit because they want to be involved in it, no matter what it is. No matter what it is. I have been out places and just met random people, and we start talking about different stuff. We'll talk about energy or whatever, and we'll start doing little energy exercises, making balls of energy with your hands. It doesn't matter what it was, but we'll start doing that in the middle of a bar and stretching the energy out. And all of a sudden, you'll have 3 other people around you go, what are you guys doing? What is this? And they'll start doing it too, just because they want to be involved in what's going on. But it also opens people up. It opens people up. It opens the humans, your human up to consciousness. It doesn't really matter what it is that does it. But we have an eclipse. We had a new moon eclipse. To me, the new moon eclipses never quite as strong as the full moon eclipses. They are the ones that kind of exit stuff out. You will always see something exit out during a full moon. And it's normally something you saw a long time ago, and depending on where you are in your process is going to depend on how abrupt it's going to be. It can be super abrupt. It will close something out. But if you kept things pretty much moved things out, and people will then ask me, well, how do I know it needs to be moved out? Right? It's a question I get a lot too. How do I know it needs to be moved out? If you're not enjoying the experience, you need to look at why you're in the experience. And that counts jobs, that counts marriages, that counts anything you're in. Friend groups, even time with your family, your blood family. I kind of usually separate out blood family, soul family, and galactic family because they're all of it. It's different energetics playing out with all of them. Why are you involved in it? What do you want to get out of it? What are you afraid of if you try to exit it? Judgment, blame, shame, guilt. What's keeping you there? Something's keeping you there. You wouldn't stay there. What do you not want to let go of because you're not enjoying it anymore? It's not fun anymore. And the farther away it is from your new frequency, and the more you expand out, you start to clear stuff from your body, you raise your frequency. Things aren't fun anymore that are in this frequency when you're in this frequency. Those things aren't fun anymore. You don't want to do those things anymore. They're miserable. They're absolutely miserable. But you stay in them because you don't let them go. You don't want to have the conversation to let them go. You don't want to have to explain why you want to let it go. You don't want to have to take a leap of faith if it's a job. I see a lot of people stay in jobs, and sometimes there's a purpose, and you can see, I don't enjoy it, but I see 15 other purposes of why I'm here right now. But there will come a time when those aren't going to matter anymore, and I got to jettison out of these realities. It's going to be different for everybody as to why you're in it, and if you can see the purpose for why you're in it. There's some realities I might not have enjoyed, but there was a purpose. I was supposed to be there. I had a reason to be there. I might not have wanted to go. Usually my human didn't want to go. But you're supposed to be there. You have to fulfill your agreements with people. One way or the other, you're going to fulfill your agreements. Whether you're there kicking or screaming or not, you're going to get there. So if you have something that has to exit out of your life because it's energetically not aligned with your next phases, it's going to go. It can be pried out of your hands, but it's not. It'll go. Because you have other places to be. You're now trying to slow yourself up. Your universe, and I'll always say your universe because it's just you, higher versions of you. Some people would say future versions of you, higher aspects of you. saying you can't stay in situation A because in a year and a half, you got to be in situation E, and we don't have time for this shit anymore. You got to move this shit out. And if you're not going to do it, we're going to do it for you. And you might not like how that goes down. That's why people are always don't like when the eclipses come around, because some people know. And if you're not into astrology, you don't know, but you will just notice things, and you'll see people, you just notice things ending for people. Just natural endings will come because it's time. But we want to judge the ending. We want to judge what happened. We want to judge why it happened. We want to get all into the energetics of it. We want to have a victim. We want to have, we want to have someone who's the hero in the piece. Human likes to define the roles for everybody. It wants to put everyone here or there, or put everyone up on a pedestal, or throw everyone away who doesn't deserve, they don't think deserves the pedestal, and then put everyone in a box because it's easy for the human to understand. That's good, that's bad. There's no good or bad. And when you get to different levels of consciousness, there's no good or bad. It just is the way it is. Everything sets your evolution. Everything is part of your evolution. Everything the collectives do is part of the evolution. These big things you see on TV, no matter how tragic they seem, it's moving the collectives. Whether it's clearing sadness, anger, guilt, shame, no matter what it is, outrage, it's moving the collectives forward because it's clearing those emotions from their bodies, and that's what they needed to do it. That's what they needed to do it. I told this story, I think like a zillion times, but I think it's the best example of how we don't get affected by the little things. I worked at this place where this guy, he was a young guy sitting next to me, and he died. Very suddenly, just died. And didn't seem to affect anybody really there. They just kept going. No one really said anything. And like a week later, it was a big shootings, I think in the nightclubs in Florida. I don't remember what year this was. I can't remember. It was so many, it feels like 100,000 years ago. And probably 2017 maybe? I don't remember. 2016, 2017, might have been 2016. And this man who had talked to this guy that had passed away every day, or about every day, because I'd seen them speaking to each other, mostly about work, but I'd seen it. And he's at the copier machine, and he is just going on and on about how tragic the shootings are and how it takes something like this to really, really wake us up and to really get us motivated and to really understand how precious things are and how we should be nicer to people. That's how I felt. Because I'm like, dude just died that you actually knew 2 feet from you. Had no effect. This happens and everything starts clearing. And it's just what the collectives need sometimes. The collectives need a tragedy because they don't have the connection with the small things. The small things don't get to them. That's why we need the big things. That's why the big things have to happen, because that's what gets the collectives. That's what moves them. People will always say, why do these things, you hear say, oh, why this? Why did this have to happen? Why did this huge thing have to happen? Why? That's what gets the collectives. If the collectives didn't need that to move forward, it wouldn't happen that way. But that's what they need, because that's what moves them. The other stuff doesn't move them. The rainbows and kittens, they don't see the beauty in those things, because when you're in your human programming, you don't see that stuff. It's not a judgment. It's just where when you're in that, you don't see that stuff. You just don't have you've got too much of the other human stuff going on to even see it. And we've all been there. So you see it and you're like, yeah, it's distorted, but we've all been there. Like we've all been in those places. We've all been where we had to be affected by the big stuff because the little stuff didn't get to us. It had to be the bigger stuff. So, all right, I think that's good enough for today. So, all right, that was great. Oh, I'm stiff now. Okay, thanks. Bye.